This is Pete Fletzer. Join us for a conversation with IO9 entertainment reporter Germain Lussier.
I was the first person in the world to say the Gina Carano that let go from Mandalorian, and that's because I'd been hounding Lucasfilm for months.
You're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Welcome to episode number 117 of Around the Galaxy, the Star Wars fan talk show. I am your host, Pete Fletzer. Thank you so much for joining us. If this is your first visit with Around the Galaxy, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you can be told about when the next episode hits. Every single week, we drop an episode where I speak to authors or celebrities or super fans or content creators or actors, and we talk about their Star Wars obsession. We talk about how Star Wars has impacted their lives and brought them to where they are today. And this week, I'm speaking to IO9 entertainment reporter Germain Lussier. Germain has been an entertainment reporter for over a decade. But the story that you may know him from immediately is that he was the guy who dropped the story that Gina Carano was dropped by Lucasfilm from The Mandalorian. And we're going to talk about that with him in a little bit. And we also get into just the clickbait culture. And we're also going to talk about his Star Wars journey and some of his favorite Star Wars memories. So make sure to stick around for that. Before we continue, though, I want to remind you to follow us on all your social media channels, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or, hey, listen, I started a TikTok. I have no idea what I'm doing there. But if you want to follow us on any of those channels, just look up ATG Cast, and that's where you will find us on all your social media outlets. You can also go to our website, atgcast.com, to find past interviews, past episodes, and you can find some of my writing, and you can also find out about our Patreon program. Now, with our Patreon program, if you've ever been listening to one of our episodes and thought to yourself, you know, I wish I was in the room during that interview. I wish I was a part of that conversation. I wish they would answer a question that I have. You can do that by becoming a patron of Around the Galaxy. For as little as $3 a month, our entry-level tier, you will receive a link every week to the live stream when I record the show. And you will be in the chat, and we monitor the chat. And you'll even hear in this particular episode, we actually referenced the chat a couple times and took some questions from there. So please consider that. Without further ado, I'm excited to bring you our interview with Germain Lussier. Germain, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, Pete. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no, I appreciate you joining us.
It's always nice to be able to sit down after a day and talk about Star Wars. So I'm really excited to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. So maybe give us a little bit of your background.
I currently am a writer for IO9 as part of Gizmodo. Before that, a lot of people know me from my time on Slashfilm. I live in Los Angeles. I moved here from New York, which is where I grew up. I went to school at NYU. And there in the city, I worked at Premiere Magazine, Entertainment Weekly, Us Weekly, real journalism stuff. You know, I worked at a newspaper for 7 years before coming out here. And, moved out to L.A. kind of thinking like, you know what, I think journalism's dying. This was like 2009. And I was right.
Yeah, you were.
I loved reading all the movie blogs and stuff. And I figured I'd come out to L.A. and do something with movies. And, fell back into blogging and have been doing it ever since and loving it ever since. And the thing that's crazy, and we'll definitely talk about, is that when I moved out here in 2010, Star Wars is done. I mean, right. I thought that was it. It'd been like 5 years since we'd seen anything. It would be another 5-6 years before we saw anything else. So I moved out just kind of, Star Wars has always been a part of my life. We could talk about that. But that move to Los Angeles, it was just a kind of a blind leap of faith, but it has worked out.
That's great. So you were working in journalism, and was your objective when you went to LA to get into entertainment journalism, or was it just sort of journalism? I'll take what I can get. I mean, I know that young writer feeling of just like, give me a job. But
I've been doing journalism for 10 years before that. I worked after college. I did a couple internships, and then I worked at a newspaper where I was doing entertainment journalism. At that newspaper, I would write about Star Wars mostly for Revenge of the Sith. It was around that time. And then, when I moved out here, I thought it was over. I was like, I'm not going to get a job at Variety or the Hollywood Reporter. What else is there? Entertainment Weekly, I already worked there. And I didn't think the movie blogs were really kind of viable. I loved them. I loved going on them, reading the rumors and the innuendo. But and then as I was applying for other jobs, I was like, oh, let me reach out to this guy in Collider. And I met Steve from Collider, and he gave me a gig working there for a couple articles a week. Through that, I met Peter Soretta from Slashfilm. and we became friends. And then he started, and then just kind of snowballed from there. From there, I'm going to Comic-Cons. I'm going on set visits. I'm talking to, major Star Wars stars. It's been pretty great.
That's a great ride. So yeah, we'll definitely get back to some of that, but let's just sort of start with, when you hear the phrase, those two magical words, Star Wars, what's the first thing that pops into your head? What's that feeling, and where does that put you when you hear that?
And like everywhere, there's not a point in my life that Star Wars hasn't been a big part of it. I before I even have a memory, my mom told the story. She passed away last year, about being 2 years old and her being exhausted from, raising me, and then going through the channels in New York and finding WPIX or Channel 9, whatever it was. And Star Wars was on. She goes, "Oh, you'll like this," and fell asleep. And she said 2.5 hours later, I was still sitting there holding her hand, watching, completely enthralled by it. And, and then I started getting Star Wars toys around then. And then again, Star Wars was gone for a bunch of years. But every time something comes back with Star Wars, it's like another section of my life. I kind of decided I wanted to get into journalism around the time of the special editions. And then I kind of found the internet and movie blogging around the time of Phantom Menace. And then, I sort of found my real stride. I got into college with an article about Star Wars. And then, I did all these really cool things around the prequels. And then finally, when Star Wars came back, when it was bought by Disney, I was in a position and I was like, oh my God, I can be a part of this. Not like act in it or anything like that, but to, actively be a part of the discussion around it, which, even though I was writing for a newspaper in 2005, no one was reading the Times Herald Record in Monroe, New York, but people were reading Slashfilm, and people were reading IO9, and people were, reading Twitter, which is where, I spent a lot of my time. So, and when, it's one thing to write about, I bought toys at Toys R Us, at midnight, or, Disney's like, we got you 10 minutes with Harrison Ford, so it's a little different,
Yeah.
Star Wars to me, it kind of really does mean everything. It's always been there. I mean, it's what I spend my money on. It's what I spend my time thinking about. And it's not what I spend my time solely writing about, but it's the thing I enjoy writing about the most.
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting because, to your point, it's almost its own genre at this point. And maybe let's reflect on that for a moment, because that's one of the, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and actually it was probably on Twitter. There was some comment that said, people need to realize that Star Wars isn't science fiction, it's fantasy and space. And I was like, it's not that either. It's literally everything. And so react to that statement, that Star Wars is its own genre. Would you agree with that as a sentiment at this point?
Yeah, I think so, especially the multimedia-ness of it now. I mean, it's always been multimedia, but I think, back in the day when, Legends and stuff was its own thing and the games were its own thing, it was a little easier to keep it all separate. Like, I like Star Wars books. I like Star Wars toys. Now that it's all kind of its own thing, other, even Marvel, which has this incredible, unprecedented cinematic universe, those comics have nothing to do with the movies. They're the same characters, just retell it. And same thing with DC, and same thing with, if I play a Tomb Raider video game, that's not necessarily going to impact what happens in a movie of Tomb Raider. But Star Wars, they all are the same thing. So I think it is kind of its own genre. And because is it sci-fi? Yes. Is it a Western? Yes. Is it a hero's journey? Yes. Is it an action story? Yes. Is it a comedy? Yes. Is it a drama? You're right. It is everything. So I would say, not like if you're at a video store, you probably, that's a thing that existed.
Right. Remember those?
Remember those? There would only be like a couple tapes in the Star Wars section, but you could definitely have your own Star Wars section.
Yeah. No, I think you might have helped me think about it a little bit differently, because I was thinking about it purely from a story perspective, like how do you bulk? There's your sort of like Middle Earth kind of worlds, and then there's all those different genres that you just mentioned. But you're right. I think the fact that it is multimedia and all connected, it definitely lends itself to kind of like, how am I going to enter this universe and it's still going to be the same? And now, are you a fan of all the books and the comic books? Do you keep up with all that stuff? Or
I read the occasional book, like kind of the bigger ones. I finished Light of the Jedi like 2 months after everybody finished it, and and I read a couple of the first comics, but a lot of this stuff gets overwhelming. I played the video games. I played Squadrons a little bit, but I loved Fallen Order and I loved Battlefront 1 and 2. And so, it's funny. I'm not as big a Star Wars as fan as I am. There are definitely bigger fans. Like I could go on a trivia show and do okay, but once you start getting deep into those novels, or, that kind of stuff, I'm like, ooh, maybe jizz music, like I don't know. Like,
no, but I'm with you. I mean, and you obviously you cover multiple franchises and things like that, so it's also probably very difficult to do, and even sort of living in the echo chamber that I spend a lot of my time. I find it impossible to keep up with all the books and the comic books, and there's an acceptance, I think, when you go into a Marvel movie and I think we just recently saw it with the Bad Batch conversation, where if you walk out of a Batman film and they change the story a little bit, or they change someone's name, or there's a slightly different setting, people accept that as a way to tell that story. Yeah. But I think that's a trap, perhaps, or a bit of a challenge for the Star Wars universe, or something as simple as the lightsaber color of the Jedi in the first Bad Batch episode. People, that lit Twitter on fire. And I think that's one of the challenges. Whereas if Batman's suit is blue in one costume and in one movie and black in another, people don't have that much of an issue with it.
Yeah. And I think honestly, like, I think it eventually is going to change, but the way it is now, it's sort of locked into that, right? Like, yeah. And I do love it. I love that I can be reading Light of the Jedi and they can mention something. They'll be like, oh, that's interesting. Or, or read a novelization, though the novelizations are a whole different thing where that doesn't all count, but, right. Or like the deleted scenes. But I love that stuff. But I feel it also is a double-edged sword where they're all, now everything is locked into this time frame. Yeah, okay, they're trying the High Republic before, you know, but we only got a little bit after with the three most recent movies, and it's like, no, let's keep going. Come on, I want to get more. Let's keep going. Yeah. And I think they're really scared of that wide open space. Like it's like it's much easier to set the Mandalorian between Jedi and Force Awakens because we know where it's going to be. We get the goalposts, or the Bad Batch between these two movies and Solo between these two movies, and it's like. I walked out of Rise of Skywalker and I'm like, okay, that's exactly where we were, 25 years ago. It's like, we got one Jedi and she needs to train the universe or whatever. It's like, she did the Emperor Palpatine. It's the exact same ending as Return of the Jedi. I was like, what happened? Like, where is the growth here? We just introduced a new person that now is going to go away. So like, I think I would love to see it kind of be a little bit more like Marvel and DC and those things where you could do something Star Wars-y. Like a show like that never happened, but like that show like Detours that was supposed to happen, that kind of like comedy show. And maybe that'll see the light of day. And I know Disney Plus now has a couple of these non-canon things on there. But yeah, I would love to see them have more fun with it. It's such a, like you said, when you have a franchise that can be so many things, why restrict it to be only one thing?
This is Jason Fry. You're listening to Around the Galaxy.
So as somebody who's an entertainment reporter who covers all the different, nerdy genres, do you find that covering Star Wars is different than covering some of the other franchises or some of the other bigger tentpole kind of movies?
Yeah, yes and no. I think every franchise has its really dedicated fans, and that either be the person who's like, excuse me, there's two E's in Wookiee, or the person who's like, you stupid MFer, like I hate you because you didn't like Rise of Skywalker. It runs the gamut. And you get that also with most other franchises. I think you just get it more with Star Wars because it kind of spans the generations. I was a fan of Star Wars, like I said, since I was a little kid. I didn't see the original trilogy in theaters, but I was old enough to have if my mom had brought me. Born in 1980. So, I was there. But and then you have I have friends who didn't really even get into it till 97, till 99. And, I feel like there's a generational gap in Star Wars fans where a lot of people be like, no, but you're not a real fan. Then I was there. Right. And it's like you don't really get that too much in the other thing because Marvel and DC have been around forever, And so no one was around when Marvel started. You can't be like, I was there. I have Amazing Fantasy 15. Like that guy died. His name is Stan Lee, and he's gone now. Right. Right. But so I think Star Wars is unique in that way. I'm talking my way into an answer here. Where, it's like it has most of the similar things, but I think the thing that does stand apart is that kind of annoying gatekeeping.
Yeah.
But that also derives from a place of like a personal, investment where like, man, it was mine for so long and I can let you in, but I really like, oh man, it's mine. But it's not anymore. It's not the nerdy thing that it was in 1977 and maybe in like the mid 80s or the late 80s when it wasn't really around anymore. That's when being a Star Wars fan was a nerd. Being a Star Wars fan now, it does not make you a nerd. It makes you the person who likes the thing that's the most popular thing out there.
Yeah. And do you think that genre film, it's so tough. I'm still trying to figure out what the right phrase is, because it used to be you could just say genre and people are like, oh, you mean nerdy stuff, because it's not even just that anymore, right? I mean, I think Lord of the Rings was instrumental in sort of breaking that wall and making it kind of cool to go into those movies, whether that was your thing or not. You didn't have to spend your life at a Dungeons and Dragons table like I did to enjoy it. You could really have enjoyed it at any level. You made a great point about gatekeeping. Do you find that when did that sort of fan sort of response, and you see it probably directly in the comments on your articles? It's funny. I was skimming through your list of latest articles, and the ones that get the most comments seem to be typically, I mean, not all of them, but a lot of the comments come under the Star Wars ones. And so when would you say it was around the Disney era that things sort of became a little bit more intense in the conversations?
Yeah, I think so. Because like I said, I kind of learned about movie blogs and stuff when I was searching out stuff for the Phantom Menace. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of the infancy of the internet in terms of movie stuff, And so, I would go to Coming Soon or Dark Horizons or Ain't It Cool News at the time to find that stuff.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, they were real, like, assholes in those things. But at the same time, there was very kind of isolated. It was very kind of insular. And the movies made all this money, but it was very much that community was kind of tight knit. And I think now, especially like once, so then you get the birth of Facebook and social media and Twitter, and you blow all this stuff, and then you bring Star Wars back, and then you put that on top of it, and you have you have people who can go on Reddit and or 4chan or something and just talk about crazy Star Wars theories, or YouTube especially, and find their people. It's kind of like politics. It's like you can find your people and you're that, and then you attack everyone else. So I really do think it was when they came back, it was owned by a corporate media like it wasn't already. People don't understand what Fox and Lucasfilm are, but like, so yeah, I think that was kind of when it was. It's just that there was that perfect marriage of like this major franchise making a comeback when the internet is at its most volatile.
Right. So it was I tend to agree with you. It was the timing. It was the time where, I mean, for me, it was the first Star Wars news that I remember getting when Disney purchased Lucasfilm. It was the first Star Wars news, or the most epic Star Wars news, that I got on Facebook first. I didn't read it in a magazine or see it on Entertainment Tonight. It came across my Facebook feed, and so you're right. It really definitely became that. And so, as somebody who has been a traditional journalist and now is one of the leading entertainment reporters online, how does this world of clickbait and click hate and just sort of the clearly inflammatory headlines to get clicks, how does that affect you? I mean, you have the history and the skill set to be able to ignore it, but where does it put your head at?
Man, so many thoughts about it. I mean, the main thing is it does affect me because people, you can put anything out there. You can put anything out there about anything. It doesn't have to be sourced. It doesn't have to be real. It doesn't have to be true. It doesn't have to be fake. You can just put it up there and people are going to read it and believe it because it's on the internet. There's very few people who have that filter to click on an article and be like, wait, where did they get this information?
Right.
Who on YouTube, or what website is this? Let me look at this website. How many followers do they have on Twitter? 1,000. Like, that could be somebody who's, there's a lot of people, most people don't do the diligence to figure out what's real and what's not. Especially when it comes to movie news, because it feels so frivolous and pointless. So that inversely affects me a lot, because when I put up something that's legitimate, or something that's researched, or something that I've sourced or double checked, or something, people don't believe it. because they're like, oh, no, clickbait. You're being, and that's because I was the first person in the world to say that Gina Carano got let go from Mandalorian. She said, this other thing, do you have any comment? And then finally I get the email. And she's like, here's our comment. And I'm like, and I did a quick search and I'm like, wait, no one else? Oh my God, they gave it to me. And then I got it up and, and that's called me working my butt off ish, to do that. And the only reason they answer those emails at all is because I've worked with them in the past. So, so like the clickbait stuff, like it can be fun for some people, but like, and also that drives huge numbers. It's a quality or quantity thing in my mind, where I'm trying to do quality pieces and then you're trying to do, 35 pieces out of my one quality piece, because if one of those hits, you do that, right? There's a million websites out there that if I write like a nice meaty feature with different interviews and this and that, they'll take each quote of mine and turn it into its own article, and they'll give me a link and stuff, and that's great. And like the more links I get in the back end, the better. But where my article did, I don't know, let's say like 100,000 views. Each one of theirs is going to do pretty well because they're so SEO'd up. There's a million different things. So, it's a crazy world out there. And, like sites like ours are suffering because of it, because you can't afford to pay people anymore to do actual work, because that takes time. Because I could work on an article for, a week, let's say, or a month or 6 months, if you really wanted to go deep on something and turn out one piece and it's great, but that's never going to get as many clicks as when the new Star Wars trailer drops. Well,
and to your point, if I understand the way it's worked, I mean, they'll take your article and they'll create 22 different 6-minute videos, and suddenly each one of those videos gets 50,000 views, and they've made more money on that than the subscription sites because of that. So I can see where it's a bit of a challenge. Right. So I mean, and the clickbait sites, it's frustrating to see the fact that, look, I'll put it this way, and it's not a pretty thing to say either, especially as a podcaster, but you give somebody a microphone, you give somebody a camera, and they have a platform, and suddenly there's just this outlet and this ability to just sort of spew.
This is Eric Walker, and you're listening to Around the Galaxy with Pete Fletzer.
You brought up a really interesting comment about people not paying attention to the source. And I remember when there was it wasn't that long ago when one of the websites came out with Star Wars is retconning, or Lucasfilm was retconning the sequels. And it was a guy who wears a paper mache mask and was quoted in Forbes magazine. And my dad, my 70-something-year-old father, who got me into Star Wars and into writing and all those things, texted me, have you seen this? They're going to redo the sequels. And it drove me absolutely crazy. And so, I mean, but does it change the way you write, or do you have to fight that urge?
It depends. I mean, because I'm not like feigning like complete innocence here. I write plenty of headlines that are meant to suck you in, and you have to do that. I'm just never lying to you about it.
Right.
And I'm always giving you the information that I promise.
Right.
So, I'm not immune here. Like there's growing pains. I just never feel good about that kind of thing.
But there's a difference between a catchy headline, which is any news person's job, and complete bullshit in a headline, which like we just saw today from I think it was Inside the Magic. Not to, I'm sorry to name names, but their headline was George Lucas is coming back to run Star Wars for Lucasfilm. And there's literally like 6 paragraphs in, under all the clickable ads, a paragraph that says, we don't have a source on this. I mean, essentially, that's the phrase. So,
right. And here's where it gets bad, though. Here's where it gets bad is that site, because it has numbers and it has a name, even though, and this is one of any other sites, they get invited to screenings and they get invited to events, and they have the emails for the people they could check. So that's the thing. Like they have the email of the person at Lucasfilm or Disney who they could check and be like, hey, I heard this about George Lucas, and but they don't do it because they know if they check it, they can't. Then they're like, why would I run it?
Right.
So like it really comes down to, and the studios aren't 100% fallible, but like there are days I have fantasies about being a publicist, and I'd be like, oh my God, I wish I could like cut the access of these people who are not doing their job correctly.
Right.
I really wish, just because, if you're going to go to the movies and you're going to you run the press releases that are all sent, the least you could do is when you run a story, you could check in with a source on it,
Yep.
like, and so, you see a million times they'll be like, just in so-and-so, so-and-so. And that's because they got a press release in their inbox. Yeah. That's fine. That's what it's for. You should do that. But then when you get like, oh, I heard that George Lucas is going to come back to run Lucasfilm. If you have an email of someone at Disney or Lucasfilm, before you run that story, you email them or you call them and you say, hey, so-and-so from xyz.com. Is this true or not? Do I get a comment? And now, honestly, Lucasfilm is tough. Disney and Lucasfilm and Marvel, all of them are very tough. They do not comment on rumors. Even if it's like that George Lucas one, if I had emailed them and be like, so I heard George Lucas is coming back, they probably wouldn't even get back to me. Right. Because like the second they acknowledge it, then that becomes a story. Like Lucasfilm denies that. It's like, well, it was never a story, but now it is. So like that's why like when I heard back about Gina Carano, that it's legit because it's like, wow, they're actually commenting on this. So and so that becomes a problem too. So like, I'm putting a little bit of blame on them. I'm putting a little bit of blame on us. Everybody's to blame for this whole messy system. Yeah.
No, and it's interesting. I think the Gina Carano situation is a prime example of where studios are trapped, right? I mean, to that point, yes, Lucasfilm certainly took a long time to comment and to engage, but engaging too soon puts them in a situation where there is a connected comment, and they had to make sure that comment that they sent you was something that they were comfortable with and we're going to be happy to let be the comment that gets out there connected directly to Star Wars or Lucasfilm or Disney, because it's not. And then of course, but then if I'm a clickbait site, if I'm a YouTuber, I can do in that month leading up to that comment, Lucasfilm still hasn't commented. They still haven't commented. Right. Yeah.
So there's always ways around it and the ways you can game it. And, people make a lot of money doing that. And, if they go to sleep at night knowing that they're, slinging crap to the world about something they pretend like they love, that's fine. I can't. I just can't. I can't go to bed with it. I feel bad if I get something wrong. If I write an article and I say something wrong about it. Like a lot of times, especially with the Star Wars stuff, I'm writing really fast. Like, oh my God, like they cast, so-and-so is Boba Fett. So blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then I'll just like say like, I forget, I don't know, something. I'll just slip up of something. And I know Star Wars pretty well and I can do most of it off the top of my head. One or two things, a lot of things you got to check. And if I get an email from someone be like, really? You thought Boba Fett in the what pit? I'll be like, oh, it's sorry. Like I should have known that. I'm like, why did I get that wrong? I feel terrible. It'll ruin my night. But other people will be like, they just make something up. George Lucas is, returning to Lucasfilm to redo whatever.
Yeah. But again, to your point, which I think is a really good one, and it's probably a piece of it, is you do have to move extremely fast now because of the internet. If you want to have a story that, if you get that information, you have to move quicker than ever, which lends itself to not being, to spelling Wookiee wrong with only one E and not meaning to do it, right?
Especially the copy editors, we're not paying any. Some sites, if you're lucky, I'm lucky that I have editors who read my stuff, but A, they're human, and B, when I used to work at a newspaper, I'd file my copy to go in the newspaper maybe the next day, the day after. That would go to an editor. The editor would run it. We'd go back and forth. They give it to a copy editor. The copy editor would then go over it again, and just for like grammar and spelling. And then sometimes in magazines, then you go to a fact checker where they would go and just double check every single thing to make sure it's accurate. By the time an article made it onto a page, it had been by 10 sets of eyes with a fine-tooth comb. These days, if you get 2, you're very lucky. I feel lucky that I usually get 3. But even then, like I said, my colleagues who are amazing. They're not trained as copy editors and things like that, Sure. So you're going to miss little things. So yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, to your point, Star Wars was purchased by Disney right at the beginning of this completely different way of reporting on movie news. So it's been a wild ride. There's a misperception, and I'd love your perspective on it. As the person who broke the story, there's this belief that she was fired, and my position, the way I've looked at it, was that her contract wasn't renewed, which is a subtle difference. Is that the right way to read it? Or
they word those statements very carefully. Every word, like what I just said, doesn't happen in journalism. Right. Happens when a movie or studio releases something. Right. Not currently employed by Lucasfilm, and there are no plans for her to be in the future. So yeah, that doesn't mean it was fired. That means she's not currently employed.
Right.
So yeah, her contract ran out. They decided not to renew her contract. Or she still has a contract and they just decided not to move forward. Like, now there are reports that I still haven't been able to confirm that the Republic show that she was supposed to be part of is not going to happen. Mm-hmm. Is that because of her not being part of Lucasfilm anymore? Potentially. Again, nothing is official until they say it. But yeah, that's worded very carefully. And that extra level of thought that you just put into reading that never, ever happened. So like, it's nice to talk to somebody who's like, that's weird that they would say that. Why didn't they just say we let her go? It's like, no.
Right.
Like we got to make sure it's right, especially for them, for like legal reasons. If they had said something wrong, they could be sued. So
yeah, I've worked in corporate public relations. I know how many hours went into reviewing and re-reviewing that.
I get that statement. I sent that email. I want to say at noon, 1 o'clock. I could check, and I didn't get this till like 7:30 that night. So it took all day.
Yep. And there were probably PR people running back and forth and lawyers looking at it. And I think that's the thing that people forget too. I mean, these are big businesses. These are not, this isn't, you and me out of our garage making a YouTube video. There are so many implications. There's contracts, multi-million-dollar contracts at stake. They need to make sure that they're putting the word out correctly.
This is Scott Chernoff, and you're listening to Around the Galaxy with Pete.
As a Star Wars fan, we talked at the beginning about how Star Wars has always been a part of your life. It's always been, sort of your go-to franchise. Does covering Star Wars impact the way you look at the content? Do you ever kind of think, man, if I wasn't covering this, I wouldn't know it? Or is it just a different way to enjoy your favorite franchise?
Yeah, I think it's just a different way to enjoy it. I mean, it does on occasion, it can be kind of frustrating that it's work, that Star Wars becomes work. But then you flip that and you're like, oh, wow, Star Wars is work? That's pretty good. So there's 1 or 2 seconds when you're sitting in the theater to watch the new Star Wars movie and you're pumped like a fan, but you realize you're not seeing it with a bunch of fans, you're seeing it with a bunch of critics. But then you're like, oh, I'm seeing it a week before everybody else. So, you're like, you have to be like, it's really good. There's the small, minuscule little bad things about it are not bad things at all. They're just, less great things about it. So, no, I mean, like I said, the reason I got into this business at all, and I mean journalism and writing about movies and film criticism, is I was like, when I was in high school, I was like, how do I get paid to watch movies? And then I was like, oh, I guess film critics get paid to watch movies. And then you realize that film criticism is fine, but then it's just the one thing. Just watch movies and reviewing them, watching it. And it's like, well, what about everything else that happens with movies? And that was sort of how, my career kind of developed. And so, when it's your favorite movies that you get to write about and think about, it's the best. And like I said, and then covering it, I have short of being on a set, which I have not been on a Star Wars movie set. I was on the set of a couple Star Wars YouTube shows, thanks to the guys at Lucasfilm, and that's the closest I've ever set to a real Star Wars set. But short of being on a set, pretty much any Star Wars fantasy I've ever had, I've kind of fulfilled. There's more, obviously. Like, I don't think I've been in the same room as George Lucas. I've never met George Lucas, but I've sat in a room and talked with Harrison Ford. I've sat in a room and talked to Rian Johnson, Kathleen Kennedy, Lawrence Kasdan. It's really surreal to sit there and it's like this, but we're in a room and you're like, what is this happening right now? Like, I cannot believe that I'm here, you know? And so it's pretty great. So like, you really do get to do some great stuff. So yeah, like I said, it's really only made me a more obnoxious fan because I can gloat about so many cool things.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah. So Matt Harrington, who's one of our patrons, asked a great question. Who was your favorite Star Wars actor to interview?
They're all pretty fun. What's interesting about a Star Wars interview is that they normally can't talk about the movie. So like I've only done interviews for the last couple movies, all the Disney stuff, and out of those, the only one we actually got to watch before doing interviews was Solo. Mm-hmm. Everything else, we did interviews having seen either 10 minutes or nothing. So I think honestly, my favorite interview might have been Gwendolyn Christie.
Oh,
because and like I said, and I've talked to Kelly Marie Tran, and I talked to Oscar Isaac and Harrison Ford. And I've talked to Mark Hamill, not about Star Wars. Mark Hamill was pretty great too. But that was on the phone. But Gwendolyn Christie, I would say like, so, you know, Captain Phasma is, she works for the First Order, and she's like, does she? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, I don't know. Is that true? And I'd be like, what? Like, yeah. She's like, well, I don't know. I haven't seen the movie. And like, she just kind of kept challenging me. Like, I can't say anything. And I look at the public, and then I'd be like, okay, so, you know, all right. So she obviously, like, you know, really has a thing for this. And she'd be like, does he though? I don't know. And it was kind of contentious, but kind of funny.
Right.
And that's memorable. But Harrison Ford, it was, I mean, it's weird that I didn't say Harrison Ford, just because Harrison Ford is just so stoic and smart. And I honestly was an out of body experience. So I don't even remember. Because Han Solo is my favorite character in anything of all time, and probably second's Indiana Jones. So like sitting there, I was like, I cannot believe this is happening. But just out of pure fun, it was probably Gwendolyn Christie. Dave Filoni, anytime you talk to him, is the greatest Star Wars interview. Every time. I've been talking to him for years, and he is the best. He never tells you anything, but everything he says is pure gold, and I love him.
When was the last time you interviewed him?
Yeah, it was for the final season of Clone Wars, like the short kind of mini season, and
yep.
And I forget the article somewhere. If you search my name and Dave Filoni, it comes with a bunch of stuff. But I think it was my thing, and I think that was like it was after the Rise of Skywalker, so I actually got to ask him about. I was like, so I guess Ahsoka's dead. And he's like, what? I was like, well, we heard her voice in the Rise of Skywalker with every other Jedi who's dead, right? He's like, oh, yeah. No, I don't think so. He's like, if you don't think that, that's fine. And then he gave me a great answer about, about how that came about and all these things, but didn't say anything. And then we saw later in The Mandalorian that she's alive later than we knew she was, at least. Right. So he's just the best. But to be fair, since he's got a little deeper into The Mandalorian, they don't let him do interviews really anymore. He's too big. He's too big now.
See, now my claim to fame is that I was one of the fan questions they used on Good Morning America on May the 4th. So my question was asked of Dave, and he answered it. So I was
there you go.
Great question here from Andrew, who is one of our patrons as well. And, Kathleen Kennedy in November or December stood in front of a wall of logos of Star Wars that's on the horizon. Sure, it's one thing to cover all that stuff, but as a fan, which of those shows are you most excited to see?
I think for me, show-wise, it's Obi-Wan, just because I love Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan, and I'm very curious how any kind of story there will not just trample on everything we know about him from the other movies. Like, you're going to have him like meet up with Darth Vader, and then you're going to go into New Hope, and he goes, "We meet again, Darth, at last." It's been like 5 years, dude. Like, I trust them, everybody, and I think that's going to be great. But I think out of everything, Taika Waititi's Star Wars movie, if that happens, with that Schoolhouse Rock logo, that kind of gives the vibe of what we were talking about before, of like, maybe this is something different. Obviously, whatever it is, it'll be in canon. Mm-hmm. But like, what is it? Like, what? Like, or is it humorous. I mean, obviously we've seen the Taika Waititi movie and it's everything kind of like Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's got the humor, it's got the action. But I looked at, and his episode of The Mandalorian is obviously one of the best ones, end of season 1. So I think those are the two things I'm most looking forward to. But a Dave Filoni Ahsoka show, especially if they start tying it into Rebels. Like I've been asking Dave Filoni about the end of Rebels since the end of Rebels, and he will know, I don't know, Ezra, I don't know, Thrawn, and they're like, dude, come on, give me. And we finally got something, with Mandalorian. So that stuff too. I'm basically all curious about all of them, but Obi-Wan, I could go on. It's like, but Lando, oh my God, is it going to be him?
Right. Yeah. It's such a.
Yeah.
I mean, the way I look at it is, it's like, and this is why when I see negativity from a clickbait perspective, it's like, no, this is the best time to be a Star Wars fan, and people
don't understand, right? They don't understand how good they have it.
Right. I mean, you and I'm 10 years older than you. So if you told 10-year-old me that, you're going to have kids who are 8 and 11 years old, and there's going to be new Star Wars every year and more Star Wars in comics and books and toys and video games than you can keep up with, I would have not believed it, quite honestly.
Right. Like, you're like, wait, you're not going to read every Star Wars book that comes out? Like,
right. Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, you tell me there's going to be comic books every couple of weeks, and I'm not going to read them all.
Yeah, and even like the 3 years between the like I said, I wasn't there for the anticipation between on the original trilogy, but the prequel trilogy, I was in there deep.
Right.
And 3 years was a long time. It was a long time, from to like, here's the, you get nothing, and you get an image, then you get one poster, and then you get, when you've got that teaser trailer, it was life changing. You finally and like, and oh my God, I went so deep on all of those. Like I said, that was one of the most formative times of my lives. Was I learned kind of how to do reporting a lot that way, because I was going on, all these other sites looking for this and that, and meeting friends and making connections. And I mean, some of my favorite Star Wars stories are in that time, not necessarily the stuff that happened on the screen, the stuff that happened to me during that time.
Yeah. It was a different, and you met, it's so funny to hear you mention things like Ain't It Cool News and those sort of thing. I would waste time on those sites all the time, just looking for any nugget, anything I could get. And
exactly.
It was a different time. I mean, I remember letting the Phantom Menace trailer download overnight on my so I could watch it the next day. It was so funny.
I wrote an article last year or a couple of years ago about seeing Sick Times in the theater in one night, because I bought tickets to see Meet Joe Black, and I timed it so I could jump between theaters. And it was in New York City during college, and it was pretty great. But at that time, before I left, I was letting it download on Real Player. Like all night.
Yeah, this
media player. Hey everybody, this is Germain Lussier from IO9, and you're listening to Around the Galaxy.
So, Germain, I have this point on the show where I have a 10-question segment where I ask you 10 questions. There's no right or wrong answer, and it can be short answers or long answers, but they sort of like inside the actor's studio, but they're all Star Wars related. I'd love to get your take on some of these.
All right.
All right, so let me fire them away. Number one is, what is your favorite Star Wars movie, TV show, or book?
Return of the Jedi. Just it's the culmination of everything. They wrap everything up. There's so many characters in it, so many weird settings. It was kind of like, it was the movie that I really fell in love with the most. And obviously I watched all of them when I was growing up, but Return of the Jedi was always the one for me. That was the most epic, and it's still my favorite movie today.
So name one actor that you'd like to see in a Star Wars project.
Wow. I have it, and it's already coming true. Is Sun Kang from Fast and the Furious. He plays Han Solo in the Fast and the Furious movies, and now he's in the Obi-Wan show.
Yes.
That is my dream come to truth, because I love Han, everything, especially in Star Wars, and then just after that in Fast and the Furious. And so that he's going to actually be in Star Wars is kind of my dream come true.
That's great. Yeah, that's a really good call. And man, when you look at the casting list for Kenobi, it's wild. There's not a bad choice in there. All right, if you could own any critter from Star Wars as a pet, what would you want to have?
I guess a lost cat. I mean, I'm a cat dad over here. I got my Disney cats, Bolton and Danforth, and the lost cats are just so adorable. you kind of maybe want to go something a little more mean because it's Star Wars, But yeah, I would have to go cute. Just go with the Loth Cat.
You can't go wrong there. And they do have a little bit of an attitude. They're a little bit
a
little angry, right? So, all right. So, what is your favorite Star Wars sound effect?
I guess it's just the cliche, but it's the igniting of the lightsaber. I'm wearing a lightsaber shirt at the moment. Just like for me, the lightsaber is like the iconic prop in all of movie history, and like I spent my life spending money on fake lightsabers and fake replicas of lightsabers and real lightsabers and dreaming about all that stuff. So just that, that is it. Because when that happens, shit's about to go down.
That's very true. All right. Who or what? I'm never sure if it's who or what, but is your favorite droid in all of Star Wars?
Not a big droid guy, but I mean, if I had to pick, I don't know, I'm probably just a gonk droid, kind of clunky and annoying, and it's a great example of what made Star Wars good is that it was just kind of like, what can we build, and like out of something and then make it look like a droid. It's just a box with legs and you put a person in there and it's great. So I'm going to go with the gonk droid.
And I think there's another piece to it too, and you kind of alluded to it, is like Star Wars, like the amount of like legend behind what a gonk droid has. Like it was, to your point, it was a background droid that they were putting on the Sandcrawler set, and now it's Germain Lussier's favorite droid. And how did that happen, right?
Well, we get to Kenner for a lot of that stuff, right?
Yes.
I mean, everything. Half of what I love about Star Wars all came from toys, and then you don't even realize it until you go back and think about it. Like, wait, why do I know that name? Oh, it's because they put it on a toy. Or why am I obsessed with Han Solo and Carbonite? And I'm like, oh, because I had the toy and I loved it, and and it just keeps going back to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I wonder if, and obviously this is something we won't know for 20 years, but I wonder if, like, so for example, I always use my 8-year-old son as an example, who is a Clone Wars guy. He's a Clone Wars kid. He actually prefers to watch Clone Wars over the movies, and but he's got a couple of, he's got a pile of 6-inch action figures, but his entree into Star Wars, he spends more time probably, playing like Jedi Fallen Order than he does playing with the toys. And I wonder if that will impact. I mean, it certainly will impact how he remembers Star Wars when he looks back on it. But it's you and I grew up in a world where the other difference was that there was, we had to wait for Star Wars movies. And on top of that, it wasn't as easy access. Whereas now, literally on Disney Plus, he can just go and click on anything he wants to see. Whereas you and I had to play with our, Han Solo and Carbonite to reenact the scene versus just going and flipping it on.
And for a long time, you couldn't just buy the cassettes, like you were lucky you taped it off TV, or if you did buy the cassette, it was used and it broke. And, eventually that became less of an issue when they would just release it with a new box every 4 years, in the 90s, THX this and special this and that. But yeah, it was a completely different time. Yeah. The kids now, like you said, they don't know how good they have it. Like, just the ease of access, the breadth of it. You can come in it from any kind of way as any kind of person and fall in love.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that strikes a chord with what we said at the beginning. It's no longer just, it's not just for nerdy kids. I mean, it's everybody. I mean, my 11-year-old daughter, when she saw pictures of Rey before she even saw the movie, she was making her own Rey costume, and she was all in on Star Wars and wears a Star Wars shirt to school and doesn't think twice about it. I had, Kelly Knox on the show a couple weeks ago, and she was talking about how, she was always she sort of hid her Star Wars love because she grew up in a different time. And it's a great thing that Star Wars really is for everyone. And again, to your point, that brings out the gatekeepers, and that's not a fun situation.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Star Wars toys, what's your favorite Star Wars collectible that you own?
I have so much. Like I said, I've done a couple tours of my house. Not recently. I'm due. So you see, I actually did a Star Wars specific one around the time of The Force Awakens, and I think my favorite one now is I have a life-size Haunted Carbonite, but it's not the one. It's not the one that's like Sideshow, where it's actually kind of like molded out like the movie. It's an art piece by a guy named Craig Drake. And so it's just like a piece of metal that he kind of like drew a haunted carbonite, and it's life size. There's only 15 of them in the world.
Wow.
And it's just like, and we have it hanging in our house, and it's yeah. I mean, I don't think I'll ever be able to afford $8,000 on a haunted carbonite that actually looks like haunted carbonite. But this is significantly less than that, and is my life size haunted carbonite. So I think that's probably it.
What's your favorite non-Star Wars movie?
Swingers is my favorite non-Star Wars movie. It's just as a kid growing up in New York who moved to LA to be in the movies, it was one of those things that and it came out in the late 90s when I was like a teenager, and it had sequences that referenced the movies that I had seen and understood.
Yeah.
So it was like the first time I was watching it, I'm like, oh, that's Reservoir Dogs. Oh, that's Goodfellas. And it's pretentious and it's misogynist. It's very of its time, but it gave us without Swingers, you don't have The Mandalorian, Jon Favreau.
That's true.
Swingers is my non-favorite Star Wars non-favorite movie.
That's awesome. That's one of my favorites as well. And I think it's probably because I played so much Sega NHL that really
another thing I was like completely related to. Yeah, related to everything in it, Yeah. I was swing dancing. I wasn't quite there yet, but
right. No, but hey, Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, great band.
Great.
Yeah. So, if you could own any spaceship or vehicle from the Star Wars universe, what would it be?
It's a Millennium Falcon. I'm obsessed with three things in Star Wars, and they're my main collects of anything, and I pretty much buy everything of them. Han Solo and Carbonite, as I mentioned. Mm-hmm. Han Solo Hoth, so just him in the Hoth outfit.
Okay.
And the Millennium Falcon. And so I have replica Falcons. I have the 8,000 piece Lego Falcon, which I built on video.
Yes, I watched that video before. Oh my God, that's amazing.
I have ornaments. I have so much stuff, and I know it makes no sense. And I don't love that we got like an origin story for it so much in Solo, but at the same time, it was kind of nice to learn more about it. But yeah, I mean, the Millennium Falcon is one of my favorite things in the world, right up there with the lightsabers. You show me that thing, and I'm like, I'm in Star Wars.
Now, which Falcon? Lando's Falcon or Han's Falcon?
Oh, I mean, Han's Falcon. Come on. I don't even like, even when Solo came out, I didn't buy anything from Solo. I actually, it's not true. I have one Christmas ornament because I buy all the Star Wars Christmas ornaments.
Mm-hmm.
Hallmark. So I have that there, but like, they're like, you want the new Star Wars Millennium Falcon Lego? I'm like, no. I like the clean Falcon. I like the crappy Falcon. I like that, And of course, and then also, I like the circle dish, not the other dish. I don't like this.
Yeah.
This wide dish. Come on, man.
This is true. It is hard to get used to the rectangular dish for sure. Couple more to go. What is your favorite Star Wars moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's I love you, I know. Everything kind of centered around the other things. I mean, it's that perfectly epic / romantic, / smarmy. It's kind of a great example of everything that Star Wars can be. It's simple, it's direct. Him saying I know is so dicky, but it's also still so romantic. The music there, and then it leads to Haunted Carbonite, which I said I'm obsessed with. So yeah, it's that.
Excellent. Well, that you may have answered question 10 inadvertently, but is that your go-to Star Wars quote?
No. What is my go-to Star Wars quote? My go-to Star Wars quote. Yeah, it's probably me like just quoting Watto stuff, like, which I don't want to do because it's now in retrospect very anti-Semitic.
Right.
But my friends and I would do a lot of Watto quotes just because he was so stupid. So I probably have said, like Annie, little Annie, like way more than I said, "May the Force be with you." So, I also another one, a lot of stuff from the prequels because I lived with them so much, or like, "Are you an angel?" I made you a Chapor snippet, like all that kind of stuff. All the stupid sidelines in those three prequels are very much my shit.
That's excellent. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, Watto is one of those characters. Yes, you're right. We can like Swingers. Was it? I mean, honestly, I was at the New York premiere for Phantom Menace in And that's one of those hindsight. You look around at who was in the audience, and it's a ridiculous crew. Everybody from, Natalie Portman to Donald Trump and it just like,
yeah,
it was a weird group because New York. I mean, you grew up in New York. You knew that it was a totally different and weird crowd. But I remember when the Nemoidians started speaking, there was like literally you could look around and people were looking at each other like, "What are we watching? Is this what?" Yeah,
yes,
a little bit bizarre.
But like he's the dude who owned Anakin and Shmi Skywalker. So it's like crazy. So crazy.
Yeah. Oh man, it's funny. It's and his voice is classic. I love his voice. So, so Germain, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. This was fantastic. Where can people find you online?
Yeah. Thanks for having me too. It was really fun. I work on io9.com, which redirects to the new URL because the internet is such a fun place. But it's just io9 as part of Gizmodo. And you can find me on Twitter at Germain Lussier. And if you like this stuff, like I said, we didn't have a lot of time tonight, but I have so many crazy, weird Star Wars stories. A lot of them that I've written about. So like, I have lived a pretty awesome Star Wars life, and it's only gotten better. And I mean, like, so to be able to share a little bit of it with you guys and your listeners is a privilege. So thank you very much.
Well, I will now definitely have to have you come back and we'll just go through some fun stories. I think it'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Germain, thank you so much, man. This was a lot of fun. And now I definitely would need to have you come back.
I would love to. Well, I will send you a list of things we can talk about that are just so off the wall and weird. But
let's do it. That's great.
Yes. All right. Cool, Pete. Thank you so much, man.
Well, that wraps it up for this episode of Around the Galaxy. Thanks to our guests, and thank you for listening. If you had fun, please like, subscribe, share, rate, and review it. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at ATGcast or visit our website, atgcast.com. And if you really had fun and would like to be part of the live virtual audience, please feel free to become a part of our Patreon group at patreon.com/ATGcast. Our music is brought to us by the band Silver Colored Knob, who can be found on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you find music. Around the Galaxy is copyright 2021, Pete in the Seat Studios.